Hello, everybody. It's Ryan from Pie Records, and I'm here with Justin from Suspect Parts. How are you, Justin?
Hey, Ryan, I'm doing very well. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I think it's great because I was listening to some of your music today. The early 7 inches and the early singles, and and the one from 2017.
Right. Was it Change Your Mind? Was that the 2017 one?
Yeah. And I love it. I love music that's got a lot of down picking. So I'm totally on board with that. Would you say the garage rock or the Ramones would have a lot to do with your sound?
Yeah, sure. I mean, a lot of us came from a lot of other bands. I guess when we started Suspect Parts, it was Chris from the Briefs and myself. And we had just finished touring with Clorox Girls. I played in that band, Clorox Girls. And of course, growing up was influenced by a lot of that early West Coast punk, like, the Avengers, the Dills, the Zeros, the Controllers, all that Danger House record stuff. And then, of course, the Ramones and all that. And I played on the first Red Dawns album, and that band, the Red Dawns, they came out of the Observers from Portland, Oregon, and they would do this thing where they would downstroke like really, really hard one part, and then kind of give themselves a break, and then just hit it again with the downstroking. And so it kind of made their sound so much tighter because the downstroking could just literally be in with the eighth notes on the hi-hat, and it could just be a and so you could like kind of give yourself a break too. And really recording with those guys and touring with them, my forearm was just like numb, just like about to explode. But then after a tour, you're feeling pretty tough, so I like to keep that when I can. Of course, with power pop you can play around a lot, but I like to stay in and just be in the pocket with those eighth notes on the hi-hat for sure.
Yeah, totally. And you mentioned power pop. Your songs are very catchy. So do you write the music in collaboration with the other guys or yourself alone? And what are some of your influences?
Sure. When we were writing for Suspect Parts, the very first 7 inch, I had sent Chris some of my demos, and he ended up really liking them. We kind of recorded them how they were. And later on, we brought in James Sully Sullivan, who played on every Suspect Parts recording after the first 7 inch. And Sully was instrumental in adding bridges and intros and outros. And he's more of a lead guitarist, so he could add really cool lead guitar parts. And then Sully ended up writing quite a few songs on the debut Suspect Parts album as well. So, Sully is born and raised in the UK, so he comes with a lot of like Britpop influence, the stuff that he grew up listening to. And I'm from the West Coast of the US, and so I have all that West Coast punk influence. And of course, in the late 70s, I also love that Stiff Records, Nick Lowe, Elvis Costello, all that stuff, Joe Jackson. And then of course, back in LA, the Nerves and the Plimsolls and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's just, we all love Small Faces, the Kinks, the Beatles, Stones, and it's nice to have a nice harmony. But then I think what really lacks with a lot of power pop bands is power. So I think it's really important to keep that punchiness and that toughness, but then have that really catchy chorus, that hooks people in, that leaves them wanting more at the end of a 3-minute song.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit about how Suspect Parts started, where you guys are from, how you put the pieces together and say, okay, this is our idea and this is how we're going to execute it.
Sure. I think really Suspect Parts started when both of our bands were in a down, not touring. Clorox Girls on my end, and the Briefs on Chris, the drummer's end, and Ripcord on Sully, our guitarist's end. And we always had a German bass player. We had Smile from a great German punk band called the Shocks. They were from Berlin and did, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 albums. Phenomenal German punk band who also are very catchy. And Andrew Bourbon, and who's also from Berlin, who played in a band called the Radio Dead Ones and a bunch of other bands. And the Germans, as they're known for, are very precise, and as musicians, even more so. And so having a German bass player, they're just in the pocket the whole time, no questions asked, with the drummer, with the kick drum. And so I think bass players are kind of a secret weapon in a lot of bands. You know, they don't get a lot of the recognition and credit that they deserve. But, you know, even a band like The Who or the Stones or the Beatles, if you just listen on YouTube now, it's crazy because you can actually have these tracks where it's just the bass line. So if you listen to some of those Paul McCartney bass lines with Beatles or, you know, Who or Stones or any of that stuff, it's like these guys, they were not only creative, but they were being creative and not being flashy, but also staying in the pocket, which is like not an easy thing to do at all. And now I even forget your question. How did the band form? Oh, right. Our other bands had stopped touring. So, so we started a new band and started recording some records and managed to do some tours, fortunately. And yeah, we'll see what happens in the future. But I'm really proud of our records that we put out to date, especially the debut LP. I think I'm really proud of that.
What where did you record that, and how long did it take you to put it all together for the LP?
So I mentioned that German punk band, the Shocks. The singer and main songwriter, he goes by the name Smile, which is ironic because he doesn't smile very much. But he's a lovely guy, just a wonderful person. And he has an analog studio in the eastern part of Berlin. I can't remember the neighborhood off the top of my head right now, but it's really near. They have a peppermint schnapps factory. And the peppermint schnapps factory, it's called Berliner Luft, which means that the air of Berlin. Like Berlin was known as being this place where as soon as you got to town, you could just smell it. You know what I mean? You could smell the excitement, smell the culture, smell everything that was going on in this metropolitan international city. And they had this peppermint schnapps, and that's the brand Berliner Luft, Berlin Air. Anyway, his recording studio is right by the Berliner Luft peppermint schnapps factory, and it's all analog. He literally somehow got this board from this old heavy metal studio in, I want to say, East Germany, you know, before communism fell. And he took apart the entire board, cleaned it, and put it back together. That's how this guy is, Smile, with his personality. And so we recorded at his studio there in, what is he calling it? Smile Shock Productions Studio A or something like that is what he's calling it. But yeah, it's just a great analog sound. We recorded on tape. And of course, when you're recording on tape, you have limitations. And because he was all analog with no digital, I think we had, it was either 16 or 24 tracks, and that was it. So we couldn't go over. So it's like, okay, you got to plan it out well. You maybe have, how many mics are you going to use to mic the drums? You have the guitar, you have the lead guitar, you have the bass, and you might want to add a little organ or piano part and hand claps and vocals. And we were really like getting close, but sometimes it's nice to have those limitations because you can be creative within those limitations, which I think a lot of punk records came out of, and a lot of great garage records, rock and roll records came out of working with the limitations that you had, whether they're budgetary limitations or technological limitations, or, and so, yeah, it has that warm analog sound, that tape, you know, that thick tape, and you really hear it, I think, especially in the vocals and the drums. And yeah, that's where we recorded in Berlin, in Germany.
I would say to get the chance to record analog would be worth the trip to Berlin.
For sure. And I've had the fortune of also recording at a great analog studio in Tucson, Arizona. Matt Rendon is his name, and he plays in this band called the Resonars that have released quite a few records. And he does all of his analog recording in the garage behind his house. And that's a fantastic analog studio in Tucson, Arizona. Station House Studios here in Los Angeles. Mark Rains, who's the engineer, he like spent his entire life, putting together the studio literally. And he had his dog running around in the studio, and it was like you're in somebody's house, and very comfortable analog studio to record in. So they're still around. Digital is getting better, and some people can't really tell the difference, and it's a lot cheaper and a lot easier to not have to deal with tape. And a lot of times you record the basic tracks on tape and then they throw them onto Pro Tools software anyway. So it's like, it's really like what do you even call it? A fundamentalist way of recording, for lack of a better term. But I still love it, because I think all my favorite records were recorded on tape, and there's something to be said with that. And I guess that was because of the technology at the time. But when I can, I love recording on tape, and I try to every single time, although it's not possible always to do it 100% of the time.
Yeah. I loved analog, and then when I went back and tried to do everything digitally, I felt the sounds just weren't the same. I couldn't get the same tones and things like that for myself. I mean, other people with more experience, I'm sure, could do a much better job.
Yeah, I mean, it's also like the mics and the mic placement. So I mean, the mics are analog, the guitar amps are analog, drums are analog, human voices are analog. It's this recording we're doing now on Zoom is digital, but our own voices are the instrument in this recording, which are analog. So it's like, that microphone you're using there, it's being plugged into something and so on. But if you had it plugged into a guitar amp and then recorded it, and then is that analog or is it digital? I mean, I think we kind of just do the best we can with the resources we have and try and get the best sound out of it possible, And so I'm not a fundamentalist in that way, but sure, I prefer recording on analog, but sometimes it's just expensive. That's what it comes down to. It's how much money do you got to spend on this recording? How much time do you have? Analog can be more expensive and take more time.
When you talk about the expense of recording analogly, how much would you say? I know touring, being a musician and touring doesn't always afford you the great wealth that some rock stars have. But how much touring would you have to do to fund your record?
I guess it would depend on how many t-shirts you sold. I think music is one of the only, it's like we're all hesitant to call it a business, but it is a business because the places that have shows sell drinks and sell food and sell cigarettes, and they're trying to turn a profit, even if it's a little dive bar. And it's funny you bring that up, because I was thinking back, and I toured for about 10 years full-time, playing almost every night, 8 months out of the year. And for large stretches of that, I was homeless, had no apartment, no job, no girlfriend. And at the time, the poverty line was $12,000 per year in the US per person. And I was thinking, if there's 3 or 4 members of a band, when is a band turning a $36,000 or $48,000 profit per year to actually hit that $12,000 threshold of just being on the poverty line? Almost no bands do. You're lucky to just break even and pay your expenses. And so I think if you had a really good run where you sold a bunch of t-shirts, I think that's probably your best bet, or a bunch of merch, because a lot of times the show's just covering getting there, the gas money, maybe the flights, maybe you have to rent a van for the tour or rent equipment, maybe you get a Motel 6 or whatever. So it seems like the shows kind of pay for the tour, but if you end up selling a bunch of merch, or you get like a cool little festival slot or something, sometimes those little festival slots could pay for an entire tour. So it's just kind of like how you're going to strategize, how long do you want to stay out? Is it worth it to go longer, for a week longer, and make that extra money? Or are you going to end up losing money because you're losing money Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday nights, but you're trying to make it back Thursday, Friday, Saturday? Okay. So I think that the best bet for a band, I think, like on Bandcamp or something, just making some really cool t-shirt designs and just selling them, yourself, even when you're not touring, just try and sell some merch that's cool and unique and, have a great design and a great color. I mean, people shell out. I mean, when I saw this Slade shirt, I was like, oh yeah, I need that Slade shirt. If there's something cool enough, people will buy it, and I mean, and especially because I'm noticing t-shirts now are selling for like $40 online. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that's crazy. And so if a band can sell their shirts for $20, I think most people will shell out $20 for a cool shirt. And so there you go. You sell 100 shirts and that could fund a pretty cool recording.
Awesome. That makes a lot of sense. Especially like staying out a little longer, selling the merch and online as well. Do you personally take care of the online orders?
I hate shipping stuff.
Yeah, totally.
So I'll try and that's another reason why I like working with independent record labels, because these guys are used to shipping large quantities of 7 inches and 12 inches and maybe even t-shirts. And so I noticed that a few bands are now doing kind of like package deals where you're like, all right, t-shirt and a 12-inch for X amount of money, and I think that's a cool strategy, and you can earn a little bit more by doing that. And people know that these things are limited edition, so they got to act quick if they want this design, or if they want the colored vinyl or the screen print edition where there's only 100 copies or whatever. And so I think, if you're smart and you do these little limited edition runs and you're like, yep, that's it, we're going to make 100 of these shirts. I just saw the Spits. They're playing at Goner Fest in Memphis. And they have this great t-shirt design. And they're like, all right, there's 100 only for Goner Fest. And there's like 1 million comments like, I also want one. Can I buy one? Can you hold one for me? And so as soon as you say it's limited, everybody wants one, when it's like exclusive and there's only a few copies, it makes it more appealing for people to shell out $20 for a t-shirt.
I must say I'm totally guilty of jumping on that pre-order bandwagon when it comes to limited editions. Not so much the color, but maybe the extras that come with it, or the special vinyl, like the double with the extra songs, or things like that. I'm a vinyl collector, so like I'm all over that. And like some of the bands right now, since the vinyl is taking so long to press, you're pre-ordering it now and you're not getting it till 2022. So it's like, okay, I got to get it now because by 2022 there's not going to be any left.
I think a lot of people in the pandemic, some people have just forgotten what they've ordered, and they're kind of pleasantly surprised when they get a little colored vinyl 7-inch and a button in the mail. They're like, oh, cool, I forgot I even ordered that. This vinyl shortage is nuts, but then it's kind of it's like supply and demand. When people can't get it, they want it even more, kind of thing. It's just human nature. I don't know why we're like that, but if there's no more sugar in the world, everybody's gonna want sugar cane. No more vinyl in the world, everybody wants like, ooh, I need that record, even though you can listen, on Spotify or on YouTube or whatever way you listen to digital music. It's still something about that vinyl, in your hand. And it's funny because every other medium has gone obsolete. CDs, cassettes, 8-tracks, and vinyl is now selling more than any of those, strangely enough. And so it's definitely back. But the sad thing is that, they do a repressing of like Fleetwood Mac Rumors, and that will be the dedication of that pressing plant to press millions of copies of this record that's already sold millions of copies.
Yeah.
And these independent bands are like, I just want my 500 records, please.
Yeah.
It's like, sorry, you're bumped to the back of the line. We got these Fleetwood Mac records to press up. It's like, geez, are people still buying Fleetwood Mac Rumors on vinyl? I mean, I don't know, but I guess we're still buying Ramones and Buzzcocks and whatever. So
so you mentioned before working with independent labels. I know Chris from Dirt Cult. He was actually the one who gave me your contact information and said I asked him about a couple bands that might be cool to interview, and he mentioned you guys. So I immediately went out and checked you guys out, and I knew I wanted to interview you because I was a fan of the music as soon as I heard it. How did you get to work with Chris and Dirt Cult?
Sure. I lived in Portland, Oregon for quite a few years, and I would say probably really started focusing on my quote unquote career. I put it in quotations because that would imply that you've earned any money from it. But really, I was part of a really great scene in Portland, Oregon at the time, where there was bands like the Triggers, the Observers, the Hunches, the Flip Tops, the Minds, and our band Clorox Girls. And I always felt like, even though I haven't lived in Portland since I think 2007, it still feels like home in a way because of the music and my friends there. And so Chris had moved from New Mexico to Portland. And then he recently actually moved to San Antonio, but he was in Portland for quite a few years. And so I always felt like if I released a record, I wanted to do it in Portland, because I just felt like that was, even though people are cheap and they don't want to pay to get into shows and they won't buy their friends' records, I felt like it was my musical home, and so it always meant a lot to me that my records are being distributed in, and I went to high school in Washington State too. So I still have a lot of friends in the Seattle area and family as well. And so I was always like, the Pacific Northwest was like my spiritual musical home, so it just meant a lot to me to have my records available to folks there. And so, yeah, I think Chris had put out some friends bands, and they said it was just really great working with him. And he was always on top of everything, which is rare with independent labels that just have like maybe one or two people running the whole thing, the whole operation. And so Chris, they were right. And it's just been a pleasure working with him. And we've been able to kind of like strategize a little bit. And okay, there's a lot of white noise out there online. It's like, how are you going to post something to actually get people to see it so it doesn't disappear in an algorithm and then no one even knows you have a record out? Because it's like, besides, there's a couple fanzines left, and I don't even know what online blogs or music magazines online people are reading anymore. But you kind of have to, it's nice to have a partner in crime, like somebody with Chris, with a kind of dedicated fan base and a mailing list. And people, I think, know that he tends to put out high quality stuff of a pretty great caliber. And so, yeah, it's been an honor working with Chris, and it's just a pleasure. He's easy to work with. He responds to emails and text messages. I mean, some of these record labels, you might not hear from them for 6 months. I mean, I'm not even exaggerating. Like, is our record still coming out in time for our tour? Or can I not reach you? What's going on? Stuff comes up in their personal lives, and their record labels get shifted to the bottom of the barrel on their priorities of stuff they got to take care of. But if you're in a band, especially a small band, these records could mean the world. If you don't have them, you're going to lose money on your tour. You need those records just to break even and keep your head above water. And so it's appreciated working with someone as professional as Chris. Even though it's on a small scale, Chris does a great job at what he does. And yeah, it's been a pleasure working with him.
Awesome. I'm a big fan of the stuff he's putting out, as well as your stuff. Is there anything you'd like to say or mention before we sign off? Maybe where people can find you online, where they can buy your merch?
Sure. I think with a lot of bands, we all have side projects and stuff too. So Sully from Suspect Parts, he's in a great band called More Kicks. And More Kicks, I believe, are about to release their second LP. And everybody should check out More Kicks, that features Sully from Suspect Parts. If you like Suspect Parts, you'll love More Kicks, because it's the same guy and it's in a similar style. And they're a great band. They just played, I think, the other night. And my project throughout the pandemic has been called Jenny. Jenny as in Little Richard, Jenny as in 867-5309 Jenny. And so you can find both Jenny and more kicks online. And yeah, Suspect Parts, we have all our stuff up on Spotify, and you can probably find a good amount of our records on Discogs, I would imagine. And anyone's welcome to reach out to me if they want any. Chris, who probably has the records, because I just hate shipping records. But yeah, Chris at Dirt Cult Records. If there's any Europeans listening, we worked with a few labels in Germany, and so you can find Suspect Parts records pretty easily over in Europe. And yeah, we look forward to the future and coming out of this pandemic and seeing what the world of music is actually like. Like for me personally, I just kind of want to hold off on touring because it seems like just a flood of every band is going out at the same time.
Yeah.
And I think it's just, now people are having to make a choice. Oh, do I go on Tuesday or Wednesday night to see this band? And I think bands could potentially be playing for half their potential audiences just because there's too much. It's like overload, So I think as far as my stuff, I'm waiting a little bit until, things calm down and hopefully more people get vaccinated. And it's not like bands touring through some of these states, it's like they're paranoid, and bands are like wearing masks while playing, even if they are vaccinated, because they're like, well, if one of us gets COVID, we have to cancel the rest of our dates, or we have to cancel, just if one member of the band gets it, so it's like, it's even more of a huge financial risk to be on the road right now. So I guess I'd like to encourage people to keep that in mind. If you're going out on Saturday night to see a band, just remember that they're actually risking a lot by being there. They probably won't die if they're vaccinated, but if one person gets COVID, then it fucks up their entire tour. So don't give bands COVID. And yeah, I guess I'd just like to thank you, Ryan, for seeking out Suspect Parts. And it means a lot that you like our stuff. And it's really nice. I think that's the power of music, to be able to communicate with people that you've never met before. I don't think Suspect Parts have played in Pennsylvania. I don't think we played in Philly. So it's good to know that, like, hey, even if there's one person that likes it there, that means that other people probably will too. So it's encouraging to keep going as a musician. So I really appreciate you doing your podcast, and thanks so much for reaching out to me. And I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Justin. I do want to say that Suspect Parts reminds me very much of my college days in Philadelphia. There's a lot of great bands that sounded raw like that. My band was more of a faster hardcore band, but there was a lot of like great garage type bands, just like yours, and maybe that's what attracted me to it. Is it reminded me of that time, which was pretty special to me.
Thanks so much, man. And if you think of any of those bands, send them my way over email, and I'll be sure to check them out. And I also forgot to mention, which I'm actually going to meet up with this guy today. Chris from Dirt Cult Records put out another one of our side projects called Maniac. And the last record we did was called Dead Dance Club. And if you like Suspect Parts, Maniac is probably even tougher, like a lot of down strumming. But yeah, Maniac Dead Dance Club. If anybody wants to check that out, I think they'll dig it. I'm proud of that record too. And Maniac and Suspect Parts were actually on tour together for a stretch of a European tour, and I had to do 2 sets in one night, which is exhausting. And I felt like I had to do a costume change, so I would do like a button-up shirt for Suspect Parts, then a T-shirt for Maniac, and switch my pairs of shoes, because I was like, okay, I can do the pointy shoe thing with Power Pop, but I need like freaking Converse or Adidas or Vans for, to be in this other band. And anyway, Maniac Dead Dance Club. Everyone should check that out because it's a cool record too. But anyway, thank you so much, Ryan. Awesome. I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you very much. And you have a great night. And thank you. Just stick around and I'll get these files to you as soon as I can.
Wonderful. Looking forward to it, Ryan. Thank you so much, man.